So we have a universal gate set and XOR and NOT. We're going to care a lot about universal gate sets in quantum computing. And with quantum gates, we know that they have to be unitary, which means they're going to have to be reversible. So we're going to sort of do this same discussion again, but with reversible gates. Before we do that, however, there's a few sections in the book that we need to go through. So let's jump ahead to chapter 3.2. And this is all about the analysis of computational problems. And in particular, we're going to start with 3.2.1, which is how to quantify computational resources. In general, the exact number of gates in a circuit, for example, like this one, can sometimes obscure the point that we're trying to get to. So, suppose, for example, some algorithm that we want to do requires 24n plus 2 the ceiling of log n plus 16 gates in our circuit. Now, you might care about this exact number. If you're a manufacturer building this, you want to minimize your cost. But in terms of the scaling, which is what we often care about, this 16 is not going to be important at all as we scale up. And even this log n is going to be very unimportant. What's going to dominate is the leading term. So to leading order, this is going to be a linear function in the number of gates required. The number of gates required is going to be linear. So we want some notion to capture this. So in the limit of large n, which we often care about, 24n, or just n itself, is what we care about. And so we want to have some notion to capture this. So we have some definitions. We're going to use big O notation. So let's let f and g be functions of, I'll say, on non-negative integers. So f and g are two functions on non-negative integers. We're going to say the following. We say that f is big O of g. F is big O of g. You could write it this way. You could also write f of n is big O of g of n for the input non-negative integer n. If and only if the following is true. If and only if there exists some constant c and some n0 such that the following is true, such that f of n is less than or equal to this constant c times g of n for all n greater than n0. All right. How many of you have seen big O notation before? Most, but not all. So that is a bit of a mouthful to say. The way to think about this is just in the inequality itself. So really, this is capturing the notion that one function is less than or equal to another function. Okay? So in your head, when we say that f is big O of g, you should think that f is less than or equal to that function g. But then it's not just being less than or equal to it that we care about. We want that to be true in the asymptotic limit, so in the limit of large n. And so that's why we require this condition for all n greater than n0. Okay? So it's in the limit of large n that f is less than or equal to the other function g. And also, we don't care about the constant factors. So that's why we allow ourselves some other constant, c, to put in here. So for example, here we had 24 being the leading factor. That's something that as we make n larger and larger, we're really not going to care about. And so we allow ourselves two conditions, asymptotic limit and constant factors. But really, intuitively, we're thinking of this as f is less than or equal to g. Okay? By the way, the constant factors in quantum computing are very large. And so often it's not super appropriate to use this big O definition. It can obscure a lot of the overhead. But in terms of classical computer science, this is what we use. And so that carries over into quantum information science. So this is our notion, our formal notion of one function being less than or equal to another function. We'll also have greater than or equal to, and that will be big omega. So given the same two functions under the same conditions, we say f is big omega of g, or again, f of n is big omega of g of n. Here, if and only if f is greater than or equal to g. So f is greater than or equal to some c times g. So if there exists some c and n0, such that this is true for all n greater than n0. Again, intuitively, big omega, you're thinking greater than or equal to. And then just remember to add in those two things. It's the asymptotic limit, n greater than n0. And then I don't care about constant factors, so I'm allowed to add in a constant factor there. Lastly, our notion of equality will be similar to from before, less than or equal to or greater than or equal to. If something is both less than or equal to and greater than or equal to something else, then it's equal to it. And so that's going to be our last notion. That will be theta, big theta. But again, up to constant factors is the only thing that we're going to add in addition to that intuition. So lastly, we say that f is big theta of g if and only if there exists c and 0. Or actually, I don't need to introduce that. I can just say if and only if f is both big O and f is big omega of g. Okay? So this means that the functions are equal in the asymptotic limit. In other words, they have the same asymptotic behavior.